In the first two lessons, we looked at what I call shape of E, or some people call shape 1. What I mean by this is this particular shape here. In this case, I'm playing an A major, obviously. We call it shape of E because it derives from E major with an imaginary barré, and of course, because the guitar is a transposing instrument, we can derive all other keys out of transposing it. Discuss a little bit the relation in between guitar and chords before we looked into the actual theory and then some practice. First of all, on the guitar, it's difficult to play so-called cluster chords. By that, I mean a chord with an interval of 1, 2, and 3, which on a piano, it would be incredibly easy to do. While on a guitar, say in the key of C, we would end up with something like this to try and play some, such a like a chord, and it's rather stretchy and rather painful, I would say. Now, for those of you that saw the second lesson, where we discussed arpeggios and the vertical stretcher, we know that a vertical stretcher for an Ionian mode is composed by 7 notes, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. But we actually only have 6 strings on the guitar, which means that at any given time, if we play completely, if we fill in all the strings on the guitar, we can only execute 6 notes, not 7. Again, a piano player has got 10 fingers and can possibly do that. We cannot do that. And that's another, let's say, limitation on the guitar. Another one is the way we name chords. What I mean by that is, when we looked at arpeggios, we kind of defined the way we name a chord and the differences in between, say, a G major 9 and a G major other 9. Once again, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, please go back to lesson 2 and look at the theory section. So in terms of naming the chords, the fact that from a lot of chords we actually tend to omit some of the notes for reason of comfort. As I say, clusters are very hard, and our guitar chords, beside big one, tend to be made by 3 notes at a time, 4 notes at a time, sometimes 5 notes at a time, which means we're always skipping some of the intervals. And when we look at the theory, I'll show you generally what goes away first. Let's put it that way. And so I'm going to show you also how you can name chords even when it's rather difficult to actually give it a proper name. Before we move on, what is it that we consider a chord? Well, a chord is 3 notes, at least 3 notes, played simultaneously on the guitar, not 2. This is considered what we call a double stop. The reason being that this particular 2 notes combined can belong to several chords, okay? 3 notes starts to be a basic for the definition of a chord. Personal experience, from real life experience, I tend to divide chords in the shape depending on 2 real life situations that I encountered in my life. One is you are in a band, so there is a bass player. So if we think of chords like 3 notes put together, then the bass player more likely is playing the root note, which means that even if I play just 2 chords, 2 notes, my 2 notes plus his root note combined, that is a chord, which allows us to create more nicer shapes, nicer sounds, because we're not playing too many notes at the same time. When I mean, take for example, in the key of A, this particular shape doesn't have the bass. Different instead is for all those gigs where you're working maybe just a guitar and a singer, or a guitar and a brass. Anyway, the guitar is carrying not only harmonic duty, so playing chords, but somehow also highlighting the root. So all a bunch of chords that actually contain the root itself at all times. So this is always there. So as you will see in the PDF, there is a bunch of chords that contains the root, and a bunch of chords that don't contain the root, although I still highlighted it in order for you to have a visual reference anyway. So, in order to understand the theory of chords, first of all, let's go back to something we already discussed in the first lesson, which was kind of subdividing a little bit the chords into families. And the kind of interval that needs to be contained for a chord to be called, a major, a minor, dominant 7, and so forth and so on. So I divided the family of chords in major, minor, dominant 7. There is a square here because these are basically the family of chords that we use the most when it comes to pop music, rock music. I also created the same, let me see if I can zoom it properly into it, the same with regards to extended families. And by that, what I mean is the addition of the dominant 7. The reason I did that is because if we look at major and dominant 7 until the triad 135, it is actually the same. What differentiates them is eventually the presence of a major 7 versus flat 7, while for minor is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. The guitar has got some limitation in terms of the number of notes we can play simultaneously. So it's not unusual that we have to omit some of the intervals from the chord in order for us to be able to perform it. Given the commonalities in between, say, for example, major, minor, and dominant 7, it's not unusual that, of course, if there is a bass player in the band, the root note can go, because it's not going to be what defines the chord. The fifth could go for the same reason. The third, not really, because in between a flat 3 and a 3, that's what's going to tell us is a major or is a minor. Another thing that we need to discuss before we look at the practical side is what do we mean by inversions. In the PDF, as I'll show you later on, I also detail some inversions. Well, an inversion is simply like the sequencing of how the chord is spelled on the guitar. So if we have a position that literally spells 135, we can invert it in 351. That would be the first inversion, or 513. In the second lesson, we looked at the vertical structure, which is this, and what we say that an Ionian chord or Ionian arpeggio contained 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 as a vertical structure. This is the same as saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The way I extract chords from it, and that's what you'll find in the PDF, is literally I'm taking 3 numbers, 3, 4, 5 numbers, to a maximum of 6, because we have 6 strings on the guitar. And to me that is a chord. Okay, so 179 is a chord, 136 is a chord, 1369, 179, 13, any possible combination. Which means that on the guitar we have an incredible amount of possible permutations. What I mean is, think about it, we have 7 notes, and if we are picking up 3, so 135, then 357, 579, 7911, 91113, 137, 139, 1. It's a bit like a pin number. We can create so many combinations, and all those are chords that would apply to that particular scale, so it's a major sound. Now, the last problem we need to tackle at the theoretical level is how do we write chords? When it comes to chord, given the amount of possible permutation, some chords are easy to write on a chart. So if I have a chord that contains 1, 3, 5, and 7, I can simply write C major 7. That's easy. What happens when a chord, for example, has got 1, 6, and 9? In that case, is this a major in the first place? Because, as I said, this can be applied to minor, as we will see when we do Dorian. This could be applied to dominant 7, and we can see that when we're going to discuss Mixolydian. So the way I tend to write it is literally G and put the intervals. And the only time I would do that is like if I'm writing a chart for somebody else to play. Because in this way, what I'm telling them is, please just play these intervals. Okay? So, in other words, some chords are very easy to spell. Okay? Like in this case, just major 7. It's easy to spell a major 6, a major 13. Those are the easy ones. But there is a bunch of chords, and you see in the PDF many, which have intervals, which are harder to kind of spelling a chord. So I'd rather do it this way. I'm literally going to write down the intervals. Bottom line, a chord is 3 notes all at the same time, okay? Performed as a right-hand arpeggio or as, as a strummed chord. The difference in between a chord and an arpeggio is exactly there. The arpeggio it's a chord, but spelled 1 note at a time in a melodic manner, and we saw that in lesson 2. In this case, we are playing it simultaneously, either as a strum or as a right-hand arpeggio, or maybe fingerpick. Now let's look at the PDF and let's see what you will find there. So here is the PDF I compiled. It's 3 pages. I'll show you later. I left also some blank diagram in case you want to print it out and write your own chords. First of all, you have the big block chord, and then a lot of possible permutation, and I spell the intervals so you see what you're playing. These are major sounds or major forms, and they all adapt to the scale that we studied, the shape that we studied, and the arpeggio that we studied. Some of them I highlighted the possibilities for barré position because it's more comfortable. Others I didn't notate at the fingerings either. You'll find what is more comfortable for you in order to execute it. These are the inversions. So 5-1-3, second inversion, 1-3-5, just normal 3-5-1, first inversion. This is actually a double stop. It's a 1-5, okay? And so, in theory, it would not belong to this discussion. But the reason I'm including it, and I'm including it also using inversion, is because there is a genre of music like metal, rock, that uses so-called power chords for composing all the time. So in that context, we actually perceive it as a chord. We don't really perceive it as just a double stop, okay? So, although, as I said, maybe theoretically not correct, I still think of it as a chord because we use it for writing in the genre. In kind of sequencing this, I didn't go for some sort of an exercise. Here I put the main triads. Okay, this is very used in funky music. This makes me think of Hendrix and Red Hot Chili Peppers in a way. One thing that I need to point out, as you can see, there is some white dots, and as you will see when we look at the practical side, some of these chords have the root note played, okay? Some of these chords, the root note is not played, and that's where you find the white dot, and I'll show you the other pages, there is more of that. See, for example, this last line. The reason I do that is because I still want a visual of where the root note of the chord is, even if I'm not playing it. As you can see, this is not written in any particular key. That's wherever you place your root note on the first string of the guitar, that's going to give the name to the entire chord. Okay, when it comes to the practical side of trying to understand and form chords, first of all, we need to understand that different shapes are maybe more common to certain genre of music than others. And as you know, in this discussion about guitar, I like the idea of discussing guitar in general terms, independent from what genre you play. The difficulty I was having when putting together the PDF was the order in which to actually write down some of the shapes that I was thinking of. And the reason for it is that at first I thought I'm going to put them in order of what is most used. But then I quickly realized that what's more used in a certain genre is not necessarily very used in other genres. I'll give you an example. This is an A major 7, 1, 7, 3, 5. Okay, very common in jazz, fusion playing. Very common certain types of pop music. I'm thinking of Sting, for example. Not very much common in other genres of music. So does this make this particular form, like Joe Pass will call it, or this particular shape, more important than others? Well, not really. If we look at one of the inversion of a triads, so this shape, 1, 3, 5. very common in, indie kind of. Maybe less common in other genres. This particular triad, again, 3-5-1, just an inversion. Very common, mini chords or shell chords, whatever they're called. Very much used in funky music, right? So it really depends. And actually, as a matter of fact, on the PDF, you'll see that the second diagram I wrote is actually a power chord, is a 1-5, and I also added the second octave of it, because you can play it like this, or you can play it like this. And in a way, now I'm contradicting myself. In the introduction, I said there's a double stop, so 2 notes is not a chord. And here I'm suggesting that 2 notes is actually a chord. But this is also true that in reality there are genres like heavy metal, rock, thrash metal, you name it. And some of it is actually written with power chords, so we kind of perceive power chords as chords. That's why they're called power chords. But ultimately it just is a double stop, it's a 1-5, right? It's just an interval, but I'm gonna sound corny right now. When we looked at, sorry, a bit noisy, those genre, they perceive, they write music using this kind of language. So I think it's only respectful if we kind of include at least that concept in the chords, okay? I know that academically is not necessarily correct, but it doesn't matter, really. We're trying to play music. I try to have a sequence on the PDF where you have group of strings tackled at the same time, okay? So you have the first 3 strings, maybe the top and the middle 2 strings, and so forth. So you can kind of play them as a sequence in a way. But you can even just isolate 2-3 of them and just keep going back and forth, okay? I'll give you an example of what I mean. 4. Then you can go through, some of the permutation that I highlighted in the PDF. These are all different chords with 3 notes. In terms of fingering, some chords kind of force you in a certain direction, especially when it comes to small barré chords, in order to execute them. Again, I didn't put fingerings as such on the PDF for the simple reason, that there are shapes that can be performed with different type of approaches. Let's look at this shape. Very small kind of shape. It's 1, major 7 and 3rd, so this is a major 7. If I finger it this way, this finger is still free, okay? That's the idea. So I can add, is free this side of, this side of the scale. Remember that the scale is this. So I can add that. Does that make sense? But, of course, I can also play it with a barré and obtain the same thing with the addition that I have access to these notes too. So I can still start from this, but I also have access to these 4 notes, and I can build other chords out of it. Okay, I hope it makes sense. But if I play it this way, same shape, same form, now I have this finger is free, and I have access to notes on this side. So I can play this 7-3, 6-9, okay, and I can play with that. And I also have access to the major 7. So basically what I'm trying to say, and I'm hoping you're understanding it, is so some of these particular shapes will kind of force you to finger it in a certain way. But some others, they might be kind of flexible, and what you're trying to achieve is some degree of efficiency. So having eventually some fingers free if you can, in order to create variations, and especially if you're thinking of playing chord melody later on. Of course, like, you can practice with a pick. And of course you can practice plucking using your fingers. I mean, those are two options. And also you can practice as a block or as a right-hand arpeggio. These are different ways, and of course it will be conducive of different ideas. So besides going through all the shapes and kind of moving back and forth in between them, you don't have to practice all of them at the same time, obviously. Try and write little things, see what happens. As I mentioned in the theory, I like to divide chords and the way I practice them into the ones in which I'm holding to the root note. In this case, our bass is on the first string, shape of E, right? So that's my reference, that's my visual reference. And they come very handy, especially when there is no bass player in the band. So all those duo kick, right? Like you, one acoustic guitar, and a vocalist, okay? Where it might be relevant that you also project kind of the bass. But also there is all a bunch of voicings that you can create, a whole bunch of forms that don't have a deep root implied, probably because there is a bass player in the first place. The way I like to practice it in this case, in order for me to be able to hear it, is to have a drone. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to play a drone of A. Okay? And in the PDF, these are the chords where you have some black dots with number, but also some white dots. And the white dots implies that you're not playing the dot, but it's for your photographic memory. I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important. And so some of these chords do have the root, which is here. But because it's in the higher octave, it tends to get a bit more lost in terms of bottom end, right? So you have sounds like this. This is 6, 3, 5, 1. One of my favorite. So the drone, the having a drone in the bass allows me to hear how they sound, because, as I said, don't forget that these are major sounds just because we're using this as a reference, okay? You might have seen me playing this shape, actually, and it's in the PDF, okay? those of you, most of you, you can actually recognize a C sharp minor. This is a C sharp minor, as a matter of fact. But I'm seeing it in the context of, let's see if I can, in the context of this. Okay, so that's the sound. In that case, because this is the root note, well, this, yeah, it's still a C sharp minor if you want, but to me, that's a major chord. It's a major sound, like 3, 7, 3, 5, okay? You probably, for those of you, with eagle eyes, you might have spotted this, which is an E major, but again, it's a major sound, and that's a major chord, because this is my root note, okay? So always, always, always refer your chords to, okay, who's the root? Who's number one? Based on that, you can figure out the rest of the intervals. And that's my root note, and that's my scale. All the notes in this scale, I can put 3 of them together, 4 of them together, 5 of them together, and that's a chord, period. I'm just going like, I'm going to take this one, this one, this one. That's a chord. Okay? I'm going to take this one, this one, this one. See what I mean? So I tend to look for the ones where I can also perform the bass, and I might end up using those in a duo gig. But also I might end up, looking for the one without, like this, if I'm in a contest where there is a bass player, so there is no need for me to hold down to the root. Hopefully at this point you already practiced enough in terms of intervals, group of 3, group of 4, triads, extended triads, and all that. All the stuff that you'll find in the PDF to lesson 1. Then we also looked at all the arpeggios that go with it, and that was lesson 2. And now with this we're adding the chord, and I guess the cycle is closed. So in this sense, I'm going to show you the way I would actually practice this. So I tend to have first a drone and be melodic against it, and maybe playing some intervals and whatnot. And then I'm going to start practicing some chords against it, and then I might loop those chords and then play some more on top of that in terms of melody. The limitation, obviously, I'm only using that shape. Tomorrow I might do the same in a different key. Again, photographic memory, muscle memory. I'm using words that we developed in the first 2 lessons in the scales and in the arpeggios. That's pretty much all there is to it. And I was also trying to use different effect pedals in the contest, trying to get different sounds and see what any sounds brings. Soon we'll have 2 shapes that we can start connecting, which means that our ability to move across the neck of the guitar will expand, but one thing at a time. trying at the moment for as long as you can, in a way, be patient, and trying to get the most out of this particular shape, okay? Before, let's walk before we run, okay? It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon.